This month's podcast episodes are proudly sponsored by my own book, Bring Your Product Idea to Life. Have you ever had a great idea for a product? Or does creating a product to sell appeal to you? Where do you begin? How do you come up with a product idea? And if you have an idea, how do you know if it's even viable? In Bring Your Product Idea to Life, I take you through the process of creating your product step by step. From developing your product idea to finding suppliers and launching your product, we cover it all. The book includes advice on how to price your product, where to sell it, and how to find out if anyone will actually buy it. Designed to help you make real progress, Bring Your Product Idea to Life is both practical and motivational. Every chapter includes clear action steps so you know exactly what to do and when. This isn't just a book for reading, this is a book for doing. Bring Your Product Idea to Life is available via Amazon, on my website, and linked in the show notes for this episode. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week, I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hello. So on this week's episode, I'm talking to Maysun Hassanaly from Ladina Yoga. So Maysun and I had a really interesting conversation. So Maysun helps people find joy and grounding in their yoga practice with inclusive teaching and high quality sustainable yoga gear. So Maysun designs her yoga products along with African artists, and all of her products are manufactured in Africa as well. And her story about how she came to start her business and why she operates her business the way she does is really fascinating. We also talk a lot about the fact that she launched and runs her business alongside what was a full-time job and is now a part-time role. She works in engineering in her day job, which is completely different from being a yoga teacher, from running a products business. But she talks about what she can learn from each and how each of the things that she does can tie into the other, how some of the skills that she's learnt and utilizes are transferable. And overall, this was just a really fascinating, interesting conversation. She was very open about how she's chosen to run her business and her life, why she is doing two things simultaneously. And I was just fascinated and inspired by her, and I cannot wait to introduce you. So hi, Maysun. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Vicky. Thank you for having me.
Can we start with you, please give an introduction to yourself, your business, and what you sell?
Yeah. So my name is Maysun Hassanaly. I'm a yoga teacher and the founder of Ladina Yoga. So Ladina Yoga is a sustainable yoga brand aimed to empower everyone and mostly also people of color. So I work with African artists to create sustainable yoga accessories that bring you joy.
Thank you for that. And there is so much I want to ask you around your business, but let's start right at the beginning. And can you talk to us about how, why, and when you began Ladina Yoga?
And I was reflecting on this the other day, and it's actually a longer story. So I'm not sure you want to hear all of it, but if we go back to the start, so I was born in Madagascar in a family of entrepreneurs. So everyone who's around me was always an entrepreneur. And I remember I always told my family, I don't want to be one. I want to have a stable job. I want to enjoy what I do. And I might not come back to Madagascar as well. Anyway, fast forward, went to study in London. And I realized I always had something on the side. I was always doing something different. I was always, for example, at university having a part-time job, or I was doing freelance translating. So I always lacked that side learning piece. At the end of my studies, I participated into something called the Startup Weekend. So from Friday night to Sunday, you get to meet a team in a location and then build a startup. So essentially, that's what I did. I met up with a team. We created this thing called Codaton, which was an online platform for school teachers and students. Amazing, was great. But then after 8 months, we realized, we're all students. We might want to go to do something different. So we split. But that really got me into the entrepreneurship world, and I loved it. Straight after that, I began my engineering career, which I really, really loved. I was working in future transport, so things like, drones and self-driving cars, so things that do not even exist yet, and I loved it. But 2019, I hit a point where I started reflecting on what I really wanted to do, and then I came across this book called The Artist Way, and it fascinated me because it really helped me to reconnect with my creativity, which I didn't have in my engineering career. So I kind of forgot about everything, drawing, writing, reading, all of that. And it made me feel alive. And I started journaling. That's when I realized that, okay, I need to take some time away. I want to take a sabbatical. So 2020, I take the sabbatical, worst timing ever. So we start in Madagascar in January. I'm practicing yoga on a mat made of straw in Madagascar. And it was the most amazing feeling ever because I felt so grounded to nature, so rooted, and I felt connected to, I felt connected to nature. I felt connected to all of my Malagasy, Indian cultures, all at the same time. And it made me reflect, okay, my yoga mat in London is made of PVC. My yoga blocks are made of foam. Everything else is made of plastic. Why is it that, everyone doesn't have that connection to nature? It should be that way. It should be, yoga is about that. And then I think that's when the idea for Ladina Yoga came, because in Madagascar, I grew up around so many, pieces of art made of organic fibers and recycled materials. So it was always like that for me. And then turns out that the month after, I was supposed to go to India to get my yoga training certification. Came back to London, COVID hit. So really the worst timing ever because I was on a sabbatical. No one would recruit. I couldn't go back to work. So I started teaching yoga, and it was the best time ever because for a year I taught yoga and I worked on Ladina Yoga in the background. And then a year later, April 2021, Ladina Yoga was born.
Well, that's amazing.
It was a long story in the making, but I realized that all of these points actually led me to that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I totally agree. I feel the same when I share my story. You feel like you have to go so far back, but actually all of the pieces fit together.
They really do. And it's important to reflect and be able to pinpoint those moments as well.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I really love your story. And before we talk a little bit more about what makes sort of Ladina Yoga different, I'd love to know, so when you had the idea, what was the idea? So I know that obviously your products you designed them, they're manufactured in Madagascar. Was that the idea from the start, or did you just know you wanted to create products that were different, that were more natural to what we traditionally get on the market here?
I think the idea definitely evolved, and it's okay actually to evolve all the time. But yeah, the main idea was create an eco-friendly brand that involved African art. And that involved also different materials that are widely used in the current yoga world. I also work with artists in Kenya. So definitely did not think about that at all. At first, I always thought, I want to put a light on Malagasy artists. I did not really think about the rest of Africa. That kind of like just happened naturally. But yeah, it did evolve with time. Also, as I did a bit of more of a market research, see what kind of things people are interested in. And weirdly, I actually started launching yoga accessories before yoga mat, which kind of is the opposite of what people do in a yoga brand, because usually people launch yoga mats, which is the accessory that people use the most and the first thing that you buy when you practice yoga. I started with a yoga bag. I started with meditation cushions. Because I did not know how to make a yoga mat. So I started with what I knew and the resources that were available around me. But it did end up working. So.
But that's really good. And it makes sense totally what you were saying about evolving. And you were saying that you did market research and you spoke to people. And I think that those are all really good reasons to evolve and adapt from your original idea, because I think often we have an idea, but it's just the seed, it's the start. And then you need all that input to make it what it is.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes deep down, you might know the ending that you want, but you might not be able to articulate it. So maybe all the work that you're doing for, I don't know how many months or years and pivoting is actually leading you to that point that you already knew you were going to get. You just didn't know how to envision it or articulate that vision.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like that when you shared your story about how you started up, actually. Like that's how that story seems to me. Like it seemed like you were going to get there. You were going to have your own business. It was just the steps in between.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about your yoga products and what makes them different from others on the market.
Yeah. So one thing to note is that all products are either designed or handmade by African artists. So I also design some of the products, but I collaborate with African artists to do that as well. So I try to shine a light on, for example, our meditation cushions, which are made of an organic fiber, which is what we call raffia. I unfortunately do not have one like right next to me, otherwise I would have shown you one. So it's a traditional art that's existed for a really long time. And that helps you create jobs in Madagascar. So I focus on also paying the artist fairly for their work. There was actually, I think, a documentary or an article that came out. I need to find it again on a news article saying that a lot of African artists were being paid really low for producing those kind of exactly the same handmade raffia material that, companies like Maison du Monde or, Zara Home were exporting because they were paid like really low and they were selling them for a really cheap price. So that's definitely something I do not want to do. It's beautiful art. It's precious art. It comes with a story, with, a unique perspective, and it has to be rewarded fairly. Also, it's durable, so that definitely counts for something. The other thing is, yes, so on top of raffia, we also use other eco-friendly materials. So our yoga mats are made of natural rubber. There's no PVC, nothing toxic. Our yoga bags and bolsters are made of organic cotton, and then the bolsters are filled with UK-grown organic buckwheat hulls. So I work with a farm here, which sends buckwheat hulls, and then I manually fill the cushions, which can get really messy. And thank God I have a good hoover. But yeah, it's fun. The other thing also is that we plant a mangrove tree for every yoga mat sold. And we plant that tree in Madagascar because Madagascar is also the fourth most deforested country in the world. People think that Madagascar is this beautiful exotic island, but there's a lot more than that. We have forests disappearing. The amount of greenery that we had in the past is not there anymore. So definitely needs to do something about that. And then lastly, I think it's about the culture that I'm trying to promote at Ladina Yoga. So aside from sustainability, fair trade, working with African artists, for me, it was really important to make yoga accessible to others. So just coming from my own experience, I started practicing yoga as a student when I was 19, 20. It's now been 10 years or so. And I really struggled. at the beginning. I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like the yoga world was for me. I wasn't wearing all the, big brands, leggings, drinking that kale juice, or bending backwards. I couldn't do that. Also, I had an injury. I still have an injury on my left arm, which meant that some poses will never be accessible to me. And also, being a person of color in a yoga class at that time in 2010, there was not that many. So it felt really cliquey. Whereas, if I go to Madagascar today or even 10 years ago, for me, the concept of, color wasn't even there much because everyone was colorful. So I wasn't really aware of that yoga world. So I definitely don't want other people to feel like that. And I know it's an issue in the UK of yoga being very cliquey still, even today, even though it's changing and it's better now. But I definitely wanted to cultivate that culture of everyone is welcome, regardless of where you come from, your background, your body, your race, your gender. And yeah, so I try to educate people about what yoga is and what yoga can be and how you can adapt it to your own needs, your own body, etc.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. And so am I right in thinking you're still teaching your yoga classes as well?
I'm still teaching, yeah. Not as often as before, sadly, but I still try to teach as much as I can. So at the moment, I'm teaching once a week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I absolutely love yoga. And one of the things I love about it now, and I've been practicing yoga, I'm older than you, for, I want to say over 20, it is definitely over 20 years now.
Amazing.
And one of the things I love is how flexible it is in terms of you can do a practice that works for you. And it doesn't matter necessarily if you're looking the right shape, or I have to say I practice at home now because after 2020, I got into the practice in a home, and I actually quite enjoy it.
Comfortable.
Yeah. And I like the fact that I can, sometimes you might want to do yoga because you need an energy boost, or sometimes you just might need to take it easy and care for yourself. Or do you see? And I like
Definitely, yeah.
that about it.
It makes it way more accessible. If you have like a home setup, and to be honest, all you need is a mat, maybe
Yeah.
a couple of blocks, and you can use pillows instead of a bolster, or even a carpet instead of a mat. There's so many classes available online on YouTube now, for free as well. So it definitely makes it more accessible. Whereas like before COVID, online yoga was a weird thing. It wasn't considered as cool or comfortable. It was considered as a pain, actually. Nobody wanted to do it.
But I think having it online also breaks down some of that clickiness you were talking about, that if you're wanting to try yoga, but maybe you're a bit self-conscious or you're not sure if it's, if it's for you, I think and even if you do like that aspect, although saying that, I suppose the downside to that is you don't know, there's a danger that maybe you could maybe get injured because you're perhaps not sort of aligned correctly or something. So I guess there's pros and cons.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's different sides to it, because if you're a complete beginner and you've never done yoga before and you try online, like anything, you might hate it or love it, right? And if you don't have a teacher there to help you, make you feel safe, adjust you, it can be a bit hard. And if you don't like it, then you might give up for good and never come back to it just because of one bad experience. And to be honest, that can happen in a studio as well, in person. But I also think that online yoga made it really accessible for, anyone who wanted to try yoga to have a glimpse of what it could be. For example, I don't know if you know Yoga with Adrienne.
Yes, that's what I do.
Exactly. So, she's amazing. She's made those really accessible, like 30-day challenges that anyone can do at home. And I myself, because my practice was so on and off before I did my training, because I didn't feel comfortable in a yoga studio. So for like a year or two before I went to India, I practiced at home. I found this person called Erin Mods. So she was leading, her brand was called Bad Yogi. And I loved her brand because it was all about being a bad yogi, so not fitting into the mold. So I followed her program, and it was amazing because I could do everything from home. But then I got to India, and then I realized I didn't know half of the things. I didn't really focus on the poses or proper alignment. And until someone actually adjusted me, I had no idea what the pose could look like or could feel like. So I think it's two pieces of the coin, right? Obviously, like, you have to think about your comfort, your safety, your needs, but maybe mixing it up with an in-person class as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I have to say, I practiced with teachers for a very long time before I switched to at home practice, because I'd reached a level where I sort of felt that comfortable.
You could do it independently.
Yeah. But of course, I think when you start, that's different. But I still do like to go to in-person classes as well, because there is something nice about being in the room with other people.
There is, yeah. It's a good energy, and it feels like being part of something together as well.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about your products, if that's okay. And I would love to talk a little bit about the logistics of how you design and create and manufacture and ship your products, because as you mentioned, some of your products, you're designing here in the UK, and then you have artists in Madagascar and Kenya, and then there's the manufacturing, and how are you managing that? Because logistically, it feels difficult.
Honestly, it is really difficult. It is really tough, and I did not think about that when I launched the company. So some of the designs are made by me, some of the designs are made by African artists. So whenever I would make a design, I would then, send it to my artist in Madagascar to maybe replicate it. If it's like meditation cushions, for example. If it's like a yoga mat, it would be either me or again African artist. So a lot happens, online. In Africa, Facebook is widely used. Everyone has Facebook rather than WhatsApp. So that's how I would communicate with people. Another thing is, things in Africa are much slower than in the UK. In the UK, I'm used to, grab a cab, order, deliver, and then speed, speed, speed. Everything is organized. You know what you're expecting. Whereas, for example, in Madagascar, our motto is mura mura, which means slowly, slowly. So just thinking that in mind, it's a bit more chilled. Which means that I have to take into account, if I want to plan a product launch, I would probably add 1 or 2 more months than I had originally planned, because anything can go wrong. And when you think about, the time it takes to prototype, test the product, ship it, prepare the packaging, do the photo shoot, and then launch, I think it can take a good 3 to 4 months. And that's usually at the start. So if I'm making a new product, for example, if I'm making a new meditation cushion, that's how long it would take. But then once I know my supplier, once I know the artist I'm working with, once we have a good relationship, then it becomes a little bit more efficient. That process can be shortened down a little bit, but obviously shipping still takes time, for example. So it really depends. But yeah, it's really not easy. And I remember at first, I used to bring the products in my suitcase from Madagascar to London. And I used to store them at home because I didn't have a storage room. I didn't have enough clients anyway, enough customers. Now, as we grew, I work with a shipping company in Madagascar that with whom I have good deals now because of regular shipment as well. And I now got a storage room, down the road from where I live, which is really, really handy. But yeah, I think when you're local to Africa or Madagascar, it definitely helps because, you get the people to trust you, you get to talk to people, and it's really important about being hands-on. It's not like in Europe or in the UK where you can contact a supplier online, order online, get the sample delivered to you. And I feel like, at least in Madagascar, you have to meet the person face to face. You have to go to the market. You have to explore different options. You have to negotiate. You have to have that conversation, get to know more about them, which is a completely different culture, a completely different process. And that whole thing takes more time, but it's worth it. It's worth it because at the end of the day, I know that the people that I work with, really put a lot of talent. They bring their uniqueness. They bring their own perspective, motivation. They can give me ideas as well. And they really want to do it. They really want to be part of it. And I know that I'm helping them too. So it's it's teaming up with people who want you to succeed, and at the same time I want them to succeed as well. So I think that's what makes the best partnership, and making them understand how is a product going to be used, because yoga in Madagascar or in Africa is not that widely practiced. So I remember the first time I asked for a prototype of a meditation cushion and a bolster, or the yoga bolster, which is a long pillow. But I remember the woman I was working with, my first artist, she had no idea how it would be used. So, the design might come with a different handle that I wanted, or a different zip. And I was like, no, actually, this is going to be used, to unzip the lining, and this is how it's going to be filled. And she was like, okay, well, you need a bigger zip then, or you need a stronger handle. So yeah, and in those cases, you need to be face to face, I think. So luckily, I get to visit my family once or twice in Madagascar, which means I get to meet my team in person. So at the beginning, I needed to stay for quite a while to be there, look at the prototypes. And then with time, I can handle those relationships, online. And then every time I travel to Madagascar.
It sounds like the relationships are so important.
They really are. I think, everyone is busy. So if you don't keep with those relationships, if you don't entertain those relationships and, ask, it's just it's having a team, you ask about their lives, you ask about what's going on, how can I help you? What do you need? What's working? What's not working? How do you enjoy that? Do you think we can do this differently? And there's definitely an element of trust, because not being in the same physical location as your team involves a lot of trust, involves a lot of, okay, well, who's going to do my quality control? Do I need to wait until I go to Madagascar to do my quality control, or am I trusting that I have that process set up before? So yeah, definitely need to entertain those relationships, and a lot of care and trust as well.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. I think relationships are always important, but I guess because you're, different countries, different, I think it's different, slightly different time zones, that I can see that, yeah, there's even more of a need than if you're working with someone in the UK just up the road, for example. Because there's a lot more that I think there's a lot of benefits, but also there's probably a lot more potential for things to go wrong. I'm not saying things do, but I can see that there's.
Yeah, 100%. Also, nobody knows your products the way you do. Nobody has that vision in their mind the way you do. So it's important to be as articulate and as specific as possible. And I think also that's how my job in engineering really helps, because it helped me to really write down the requirements. So what does my product look like? What does it need to have? How big is, the handle supposed to be? How much buckwheat wool is supposed to fit? How does the inner lining fit into the cover? How big do I need to make that inner lining for the cover to fit? How tough the zip needs to be? How do I measure and test that? So I think, yeah, there's definitely, it's good to see that correlation between my engineering job and my business, and how it helps me as well. I definitely didn't realize that before.
As you said that, I've realized what an advantage that is, because I used to have my own brand of products. And one of the things I found really, really key was giving such a tight specification that was so specific that there wasn't room, because I worked with an overseas supplier as well. And I found that the more specific I could be, the better the outcome. But I think not having that engineering background, there were definitely things that I missed, that I'm sure that the specifications and what you're coming up with, I'm sure are so specific, but that's extremely helpful for everyone, because everyone you're working with wants to do a good job and they want to produce what you want. So I think you're definitely helping everyone by being very precise in terms of what your product's made of, how it's constructed.
Yeah, it really helps. And I think even in the future, hopefully, even when I have a team, it'd be good to already have those processes in place, and those product, requirements and everything explain or map down somewhere, so that it's really easy to anyone to onboard and say, oh, okay, that's how this is made. That's how we're going to continue doing that. Oh, that's how we can modify this. And I am the kind of person who has like a lot of ideas at the same time, but I also love to map them, which is good and bad, because I love taking the time to map ideas, maybe too much time. But I know that in the long term, if I ever need to reflect on something, I know where that's stored. I know where to find it. I know how I can modify it. I know how to link it to something else. So that's always really handy. Sometimes it takes time to implement those processes, but it really helps for the long term as well. And also, like, when it comes to explaining a product, having a sketch or a picture to show, your team is always helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned that you still have your engineering role. Talk to us a bit about how you're growing your business alongside your full-time engineering role as well.
It's really tough. It's really tough. It's been, 3 years now. Ladina Yoga is going to turn 3. So after that year of COVID, teaching yoga, working on the brand, I went back into engineering in 2021. And the first year was really tough, because I, was back into engineering. I was working on my brand. I launched the brand, and I burned out. I was spending too much time on the screen. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was still teaching yoga 4 or 5 times a week. So I was doing 3 jobs at the same time. And it's really ironic coming from a yoga teacher to not take some rest, but yeah, it's still a business. And that really taught me to break down my goals into micro level. so that those big goals will become easier. So now I have like my big plan. So I plan my goals in quarters, and then I break those goals into, okay, what's my goals for the month? What's my goals for the week? And then every week I would reflect on my goal. Every day I would have a plan. And then sometimes I like to not follow the plan, because if it's too strict, if it's too mapped, if it's too scheduled, then it kind of takes the fun out of it. So on some days, I like to be like, you know what, I don't care. I know roughly what I need to do anyway. And I would just focus on what I enjoy doing right now, because I want to maintain that notion of fun. And then when it comes to my full-time job, it's actually a little bit easier this year because I've gone down to part-time, which gives me a lot more time to work on Ladina Yoga. But the first 2 years, yeah, they were really hard. And then I remember a friend told me, because I was complaining about, sales being slow in the first year. And I thought that I would just have to launch the website, sit back, and that orders would come in. And I had no idea what I needed to do. I didn't know about going to markets. I didn't know about, wholesale, PR. I just thought, oh, people will notice and people will contact me and it would just fall from the sky. And then this friend told me, take 2 hours, 2 hours every day, put them in your calendar, make sure that you do those 2 hours every day. If you can do more, great. Just take time for yourself as well. But as long as you do 2 hours, you should see an improvement. You should see things happening. And that really stuck. And then from 2 hours, it went to 3 hours or working weekends. But I just maintained the consistency. And yeah, some weekends I do not work, or some evenings I do not work because I do not feel like it. I don't want to force myself, but I know that the next day I will come back to it, I will be efficient, and I will get things done. So I think it's about having that balance of, what do I need to do? What do I feel like? What's priority as well? So yeah, I realize it's about consistency. It's about working with your energy. So really respecting your energy and your mood, your energy level. There will always be priority tasks to be done. So unfortunately, being a solo founder means that sometimes you have to prioritize those. You have to respond to an email sometimes when you feel a bit low or when you feel a bit sick. And I think now that I'm part-time, that's much easier. But I know that the first 2 years, it really wasn't. And I also had to give up teaching yoga because of that, because I couldn't do everything. And I think another aspect of that is the ego. I definitely, it was hard to admit that I couldn't do everything, because I love doing a lot of things at the same time. And I love thinking that I can, but actually I can't. And that realization for me was tough, but also powerful, because it helped me to focus. So now I'm back to teaching yoga, but I'm back to teaching once a week. And I know I can do that because I'm now part-time with my work. So I had to really rethink about my priorities. The other thing about having a full-time job, and I was reflecting that the other day, is, I always thought that the aim was to grow my business enough so that I could quit my full-time job. But recently, I've been thinking, now that I'm part-time, I'm really enjoying my engineering job. And I equally love Ladina Yoga. I love being able to use my creative side of my brain and the logical side of my brain. And I don't know if I will stop working in engineering, because I also love it so much, and because it teaches me so many skills I can also apply at Ladina Yoga. And this can be controversial, right? Because all the advice that you hear, on TikTok or on YouTube is, this is what you need to do to quit your 9 to 5. And I've thought about that for a long time, but now I'm thinking, well, I enjoy my 9 to 5. I enjoy my half of my 9 to 5 when I have it, because I know it's temporary, as in it's part-time. I know I'm enjoying the people I work with. I know that I enjoy coming up with solutions, contributing to society, contributing to the future in engineering. And it also helps me to speak to customers at Ladina Yoga. It helps me to know how to pitch a project or a proposal. It helps me to think logically. It helps me to, you know, there's a lot of transferable skills. Managing people, for example, is one of them. And I feel like in my business, because it's so close to my identity, to my ego, because Ladina Yoga is part of my cultures. It's Madagascar as well. So it's a lot about my identity. It's my baby, which means that sometimes I can think about it in a very emotional way. But my full-time job, part-time job now, engineering side, has taught me to also detach and look at it from a logical way, take logical decisions, not just emotional decisions, which is still something that I'm trying to find my balance with. But yeah, it's an interesting evolution, because I didn't think I would ever say, well, I want to keep working in engineering.
I think it's really good to hear you say that, because you're right. A lot of people start up these product businesses alongside a full-time job or a part-time job, with the goal being one day that's their full-time income. And I don't hear many people say, do you know what? I don't think I want that, actually. I think I want to do both of these things. And I think that's a really positive thing, because you're making the decision that works for you, rather than just going with what, I don't know, the internet tells us we should be aspiring for. And if you're enjoying both and they're fulfilling, and why not? I actually think that maybe things are changing a bit. When I started this podcast, sometimes I would speak to people who would be running a business alongside their job. But often that was something they didn't want to talk about. They wanted to give the impression perhaps that the business was their full-time. They weren't comfortable with talking about, actually, I do this and I do this. But I've definitely noticed in the last couple of years more people saying, actually, I do this, but I'm also a teacher, or I do this, but I also have a corporate role. And I think the more that we talk about it, it's really helpful, because it lets people see that actually you don't have to aspire to be something because you think you have to be it. You can create, the business and the life that works for you.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think it shows people all the different ways you can create a business as well, and all the different phases of life. I think people hesitate, or business owners hesitate, to talk about it, because it might make their community feel like they're not 100% involved or 100%, focused. And that's definitely something that I feared as well. But I talk about it a little bit more now, because I know that my job as in engineering also influences the amount of time that I can give to my business, or show up on my Instagram stories, for example, which I really struggle with. But yes, I think people appreciate when you show them the full you. So being authentic as possible, being as honest as possible, is so important. Like, for example, I know that there's been, brands that I admired, and I always thought, how do they do this? How are they so good at it? And it's only after they gave an interview, or went to a podcast, or posted something on social media, that I realized, oh my God, okay, they also, work a full-time job at the same time. And that reframes the whole story in my mind, because you actually never know what someone is going through, what someone is doing in the background. Maybe they're having some personal issues. When someone has a business, it's not just 100%, because we still have life going on. We still have other things going on. So yeah, I think it's hard to understand the full scope of that. So being transparent, I'm not saying, tell your whole life to people, but being a little bit more transparent about what you do can help with your interaction with your community.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, it's whatever it is that you're doing. So to give an example, I work around my children, because I have two school-aged children. They're still quite young. And for a long time, I didn't say to people, oh, I can't do calls at 4 o'clock because we have swimming lessons, or I can't do this because I have school pickup. I used to say I'm not available, but I didn't used to say why, because like you said, I used to think people will think I'm not committed to this.
Yeah.
But now I've got to the point where I think, and I think this not just about myself, but about any small business owner, that if you're running your business alongside a job, a family, whatever your other commitments are, if anything, you're more passionate, because presumably you don't have to be doing both, especially if you have a full-time role, you have your income, you don't have to be choosing to do something else on the side. You're doing that because you want to. So for me, I think it actually shows, that person is very committed because they're making the choice to add something which arguably takes up more time, maybe gives you more stress. So I actually think it's a real positive.
That's a good point, actually. I did not think about that. But I can relate to your story about not telling people that, you had to pick up your kids and leave early. Not similarly, but maybe in the other way. I did struggle at the beginning when I came back into engineering after teaching yoga, after my sabbatical. I struggled to tell people at work that I was a yoga teacher and that I took a sabbatical. Even though sabbaticals are very accepted nowadays, it's very normal. So many people take a sabbatical. But I struggled to tell people that I was teaching yoga for a year, and because it had nothing to do with engineering. And when I finally did, someone in my team told me, well, we're looking for a well-being lead. Do you want to be the well-being lead? And I thought, oh my God, like I never thought people would think about that or, accept me like that in a way. And then I led the well-being initiatives for a year. So I started implementing yoga and meditation sessions. And people were totally open to it. And again, it had nothing to do with engineering. And I made that story in my head myself. But yeah, sometimes we don't know how people are going to react. But maybe what if we tried?
Yeah, you're right. And I think often people can surprise you. And it's funny the opportunities that can come just by people finding out something about you that maybe they didn't know. And I've certainly had that in life before where I've been talking to someone and then you have this realization, oh, you do this. I had no idea you taught yoga or whatever the thing is. And I think that's, it's just so nice to learn about people. And I think in general, people are really open to finding out more about us.
Yeah, there's a great book about it, which is called The Multi-Hyphen Method by Emma Gannon. That's a book that I read actually around the time I took my sabbatical, just before that really taught me that it's okay to do multiple things. So that's what the author calls being a multi-hyphen. So you can be, for example, a doctor and a photographer, or an engineer and a yoga teacher. Like there's so many examples like that nowadays. But I think getting to the point where you accept that it's okay, and it's fine to have different hobbies or different income streams or different, businesses or whatever that have nothing to do with one another. That's when you start liberating yourself from, I don't know, I guess like your beliefs, or what you thought in your mind was true.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look at that book because that sounds really interesting, and I really like that. I mean, I feel like it's something that maybe. So when you talk to a child, I know when I talk to my children, my daughter will say, "Oh, I'm going to be this and this. I'm going to be a pop star and a teacher, and I'm going to have a cafe.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
all of the things." But I think when you get to I think that kind of gets drummed out of us as we get older. When we're little, we think we can do anything and be anything. And then somehow I think we lose that. So I think it's good to embrace everything.
It is. And there's so much to discover in life as well. So it would be sad just to focus on one thing. Or maybe if you're so passionate about it, then yeah, amazing. Go for it. Do it. Do that single thing for your whole life and become an expert. That's also amazing. I guess, I guess it means also that it's harder to be an expert on something if you end up doing those multi-hyphens, and a lot of them in your lifetime.
I think so too, but I think it's nice to think that to have the freedom where you have the freedom, because not everyone does, but if you do, to have the freedom to choose to say, I'm going to do this and this is going to be my career and my life and my vocation, or to say, actually, I'm going to try lots of different things, whether that's different roles or different country, whatever it is. I think that it's nice if you are able to be able to decide, okay, this is what works for me, and to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's why having role models or people to look to really helps, because often until someone hasn't done it before you, you might not do it. because we have a tendency as humans to compare ourselves or look up to others, which can be good or bad, I guess, because others can be a source of inspiration. So, sometimes in those cases it's good. But yeah, even in engineering, for example, I didn't know anyone who was an engineer before I went into it, and I still did because I flipped a coin actually. So that was not even planned, but that's another topic. But yeah, having role models, people to look up to, people who've done similar things that you would like to do, and then maybe meeting those people or contacting those people, asking them to become your mentor or asking them for advices, that can always make you more inspired or motivate you to go down that route as well.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. And thank you for talking about all of this, because I think it, like you say, it really helps to be open, because it will inspire people. And I don't know if you found when you started in engineering, I know that for a long time there weren't many, and I'm assuming there still aren't as many women as men in engineering. Am I correct in that assumption?
You're very correct.
So I think even that, you will be, there will be women and girls who see you as a role model because you're a woman in engineering. And then I think to talk about, as well as being your engineering role, also teaching yoga, so something completely different. I think it just helps people see what the possibilities are.
100%. Yeah. It's funny actually, because I just realized in engineering or STEM, there is a lack of women. And then in yoga, it's actually the opposite. There's a lot more women than men. And so it's interesting to be part of those two different industries, not just because of like the type of activity, but also the type of people you meet. So for example, in engineering, yes, it will be more male dominated and more, logical, mathematic. People have like a mathematical mind. Sorry, not sure if I'm pronouncing that well. And then in yoga, you would have people who are more focused on self-care, being yourself, self-improvement, which are two different areas, but also so interesting. So it's really nice to be able to be part of those two different communities in a way, because they're both interesting.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Oh, thank you. And thank you for talking about all of this. Now, I've got one final question before we finish, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And obviously, you've shared so much with us. But so last one, it might be a tough one. What would your number one piece of advice be for other product creators?
Actually have a lot of advice, but if I have to tailor it down to one, I would say don't hesitate to ask for the help. I did for a long time because I thought I could learn everything by myself. I don't need anyone to help me. I'm the founder. I can do this. And again, that was my ego and that was my pride coming into it. And that actually would slow me down from making progress because I can't learn everything by myself. So if you can, ask for help, do that training, message that person, ask that mentor to mentor you. And that's going to speed up your business so much more than, thinking you can learn it by yourself. There might be small things that you can learn by yourself, but when it's something that, for example, really scares you or make you feel like you're making too slow of a progress, then maybe it's time to ask for the help. Yeah, I think that would be my biggest advice.
That's really good. Thank you. And I think, yeah, asking for help and asking for advice as well, because I think, like you say, you don't have to figure everything out yourself. There's so many resources out there and so many people I think are willing to help. You were talking earlier about if there's someone inspires you, someone who's maybe had a similar path, maybe see if they mentor you. And I think a lot of people, obviously time is a factor, but I think most people are happy to help, to give advice and to do what they can.
I think so, yeah, because helping people also makes you feel good about yourself. And we often think that, oh, I'm not gonna bother them, or they might be too busy. But actually the response might be completely different and they might be so open to helping you. They just need another email chaser. That's it, because they were busy and then your email got lost or your message got lost in their inbox. So yeah, chasing people is also really important.
Yeah. And I think in life, it's always just good to ask, because I think the worst you can get is a no. And I mean, even coming back to this podcast, I think you reached out to me and said, I'd love to be on your podcast. And I said yes.
Yeah.
And I actually really like it when people ask. The worst I'm ever going to say is, no, you're not a good fit. But actually, it's nice to be asked. It works both ways. I think it's quite flattering when someone asks, can I ask your advice, or can I come on your podcast, or could you help me with something? Because I think that a lot of us are maybe hesitant, but I think people in general like to be asked for help as well. So I think it works both ways.
Yeah, I think it shows interest, and it shows respect as well. And the fact that that person, put their, again, I'm going to come back to it, ego and pride aside, and said, you know what, I'm just going to reach out to them. I'm not going to wait for them to reach out to me. So it means that, I think I read this back to our previous conversation, that, they're dedicated. They want to make the first step and go for it.
Yeah. And also coming back to something you were talking about earlier, connection. And so in relationships is so important. And it's really nice to have a relationship with someone, to reach out and connect with you. I think these are all things that benefit everyone.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, like yoga as well, it's all part of building a community. I think I didn't realize that as well. When I launched the brand, I didn't realize how much work it would take to find, well, first tailor down to my LDL market, but then like find the people who would ideally be part of that community, and then keep connecting with that community. Because I think the world that we live in nowadays, people like to feel part of something. People like to belong. There's so many things out there, and there's also so much loneliness, that people value trust, they value connection, they value community. And it's also, I think, very innate as human beings. We like connections. We need connections, and we thrive on it.
Oh, thank you so much, Maysun. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared.
Thanks so much for having me, Vicky. It's been such a great conversation. I really had a good time.
And me too. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a lovely day.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago, because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features, like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.